Yeah, that nose wheel. I've flown with guys in these little jets, Mike, and you probably have too. That you're right. As soon as those mains are on, and usually it happens after a greaser. You know, that nice landing, you can't even tell if you're still flying or not, and then they just relax pressure on the yoke and bam on the nose. I'm like, oh my god, you just broke something. I swear I hear a noise right now I never heard before. Something's rattling. You know,
right? Totally. Yeah. Hello, welcome to the Pro Pilot Playbook. I'm Mike Martin.
And I'm Sean Ritchie.
Yeah, and we're here today weekly to give you the tips, tricks, and hacks to become pilots faster and cheaper. And today we've got kind of a fun episode. A couple...
We're already starting off fun, Mike, because behind you is a cat floating by on the TV behind.
Oh, yeah, that's my Roku screensaver. Yeah, I get lots of comments about what's on my TV, so I'm trying to change it up a little bit. But
Gotcha.
But we've there's been a couple big news stories in the last few days about these hard landings or alleged hard landings with the two biggest, well, not the biggest, two very major airlines being Delta and United. So have you read those, Sean?
I have. And one of them absolutely 100%. That was a screw up by the guy at the helm of that thing. There's no two ways to present that information any other way than somebody messed up. The Delta one, we can talk about it, but passengers are reporting it was a hard landing that most likely caused it. But of course, passengers don't always know what they're talking about. I remember watching a news story. This was like 20 years ago. There was an airplane that ran off the runway, and you know how the news shows up on the scene and they want to interview all the passengers.
Right.
And there's this good old boy on there talking. He's like, yeah, I knew we were in the mud because I saw them tires spinning and shooting up mud. And I'm like, oh my God, somebody put this guy on the news as a joke.
Unbelievable, man. So, let's start with the United one. Yeah, let me pull that up. So, do we know what airport that was at?
The United was in Houston. I'm not sure which Houston airport, but it was in Houston.
Yeah, in the airplane's totaled, right? Isn't that what they're saying?
Yeah. So the fuselage got crinkled on that, and that was one of United's older 7.6 or whatever. Actually, it could have been one of the 7.6-300. That could have been one of the ones the airplane that I flew to Hawaii, actually, even on,
right.
Those things are 20-30 years old, and with damage like this, even if it was a new airplane, that thing's done. I seriously doubt that airplane will ever fly again.
Yeah, 193 passengers on board and 11 crew. It was a 767 ER. The damage included wrinkling and tearing of the fuselage. So, anybody that's started their flight training and started learning to land, I mean, we've all had hard landings. Everybody's done it. So I guess this is reassuring that it does happen in the big leagues too.
Right.
Anything can go wrong. And of course, we don't have all the information at all. I mean, we just have these stupid internet news reports. So we don't know, what could have went on. Maybe, something medically happened or something mechanically happened to the plane. It may not be the pilot's fault, but so we don't want to, jump to conclusions, but it's not looking good for United. I mean, it looks like the wind was reported at 3 knots.
Right.
That's like barely a stiff breeze. I mean, really. Right. Now, a lot of times, a lot of these landing accidents happen when it's super windy. You get really high winds, maybe a crosswind. You got to, dip the wing down to land and all of that. And it can be very tricky. Also, when the winds are really high, you get a lot of pockets of turbulence and you can get fluctuations in airspeed because it's very critical. You hold in, reference airspeed on the way in, and that can be difficult if it's windy. But man, 3 knots, Sean, that's not a lot.
There's pictures of this airplane on the internet. You can Google. Maybe I'll put some links in the description here below if you're watching on YouTube. But where the creasing and the crinkling of the fuselage happen. When I first looked at it, my immediate thing was somebody landed this thing on the nose wheel, or it took a hard strike to the nose wheel. And it's interesting. You just mentioned the wind being so low. Now I got question marks in my head, because this typically happens when you're fighting a crosswind coming in. Your angle attack is up, and you'll touch down on one of the mains usually first, but in a high crosswind, you may not be able to get that other main. I've seen video of this happening on big passenger airliners of you'll get a bounce on one of those, all that force going on one of those main wheel struts bounces the airplane. And if the winds and, you get a little hiccup in that constant steady crosswind,
Right.
Now that nose is headed towards the ground, and you have the full force of that aircraft hitting on that nose wheel, which is not made to take that much force.
No.
And then you could even get a bounce back to the mains, and then a bounce back to the nose again.
Right.
That's where crinkling of the fuselage like this takes place. And that, I guarantee that's what happened in some form or fashion. That nose wheel struck that pavement way harder than it was supposed to.
Yeah. And we were talking off camera, you see this a lot of times with new pilots too. They'll, they touch down really smooth on the mains, and then they're like, oh, that was a perfect landing. And then they just kind of shut down, and then they allow the nose wheel to smack onto the pavement. And, you can really, the mains are what's designed to take that blunt. The nose is not designed to your point, take that really heavy.
Right. Yeah. From a little Cessna to the business jets we fly, to a 787.
Right.
The mains are what touches first, and unless you're in a tail dragger, but then you want that 3-point landing, all three of them on the ground at once.
Right.
But yeah, that nose wheel, I've flown with guys in these little jets, Mike, and you probably have too, that you're right. As soon as those mains are on, and usually it happens after a greaser, that nice landing, you can't even tell if you're still flying or not. And then they just relax pressure on the yoke, and bam on the nose. I'm like, oh my God, you just broke something. I swear I hear a noise right now I never heard before. Something's rattling,
Right. Totally. Yeah. And, we're not trying to throw stones. I mean, because 90% of all aviation accidents, or maybe even more, are pilot error. I mean, it's always the pilot's fault. They blame, and the system set up that way so they don't sue the manufacturer and all that, really. But yeah, this definitely, it could have been technique. There are some rumors, and these are just rumors. I don't want to state my sources, but what's the Wall Street Journal say? According to people familiar with the matter, this may have been a training flight. Actually, it may have been check airmen actually controlling the plane. I don't know if that's true. There's a lot of chatter on the internet and everything saying that. So you got a lot going on. I mean, I'm sure Sean's done some training in jets. When you fly the simulator and you get 90% there, but somebody has to check you out in the plane, and it's stressful for both the new hire and the guy doing the training, doing it. They pick some very experienced guys typically to train new hires. They don't, correct me if I'm wrong, you would know more, Sean, but if you're being trained as a airline pilot, your first landings are with passengers on board. The first time you've ever landed an airliner is with passengers, right? They don't fly it empty for training, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as you're released onto a line or reserve, actually, before you even make it to reserve, you'll get a line with it's called IOE, initial operating experience, and you'll fly I think for me it was a couple weeks. It was probably like 2 weeks of 3 or 4 day trips with this same captain. It's a special captain. He's a training captain, and you'll fly most of the legs, maybe not the first couple. but you will fly the airplane. And the first time you ever fly that airplane, you got a load of people behind you. Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm sure you remember that crystal clear, right? Your first time flying an airliner like
Oh yeah,
that.
it was a good feeling. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how was your landing?
That's the stuff dreams are made of. I mean, you know, you finally made it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember the landing, but um and
Did you damage
this
the
was in
fuselage at all? Or
no, there was no damage. I know that much. But this was in one of those regional jets, Canadair regional jet, CRJ. And I mean, those things are, to be honest with you, those are a piece of cake to land smoothly. I mean, they got the trailing link gear, and
yeah.
it's not like some of the business jets we fly. Like, you know, if you're not good at what you do, it's going to come out in the landing. Those things can mask a lot of bad landings.
Yeah, the trailing link, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, describe what that is.
Basically, it's a contraption. It would be nice through this on me. I may have actually been able to get a picture here, but basically, instead of just having a strut with a wheel on the bottom of it, you know, and you come down and land, it takes the force, you know, straight up. Now
Right.
you have a strut with, here's the airplane up here, by the way. And now you have a second arm on the strut, and the wheel is back here. So as you come into land, you get double flex. You get the flex of this arm moving as it strikes the pavement, and this arm also moves. So it's almost like this big spring that absorbs even more of the impact of the landing.
Yeah, and it's really nice. So yeah, I know when I transition to a jet with trailing link, you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna smack, and then it's like, ooh, nice gentle touch. And you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
like this plane. This makes me look really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh you know, and you know, the speed that you're on the approach matters a great deal. If you're fast and you try and force it on, you can get a hard landing or a float. Or if you're slow below ref, like I think in maybe in that San Francisco thing, I know they were way below ref in that crash a long time ago, but the airplane won't really flare. It'll kind of just smack into the runway. So yeah, a lot of factors going on with landing. It's the hardest part. You got all the wind. It depends on, and the plane doesn't land the same way every time because the weight's always different on the plane. You
Sure.
know, especially on these big airliners. You know, yeah, you got different environmental conditions. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. That's a good thing, you know, if you're somebody just getting in aviation and you've just experienced landings on an airliner, you know, there are days where I hate to say this because I don't know, I might take this back, but there are days where the smooth landing doesn't exist, especially in what we do, Mike. You know, if we're going into, I was just in, over on the East Coast going into a strip that was 3,700 feet long.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. And you don't mess around with finding the greaser in a business jet on a 3,700-foot long runway.
Hell no, no.
You put that thing on the ground and you stop it. And if it turns out to be a smooth one, hey, Lady Luck was with you that day. But
Yeah, yeah, totally. You know, Ocean Reef Club, you know, what's that,
yeah,
4,000 or whatever. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I've
those
had
kind of things.
some,
And you're dropping in
yeah,
below trees. So now you're, yeah. Most standardized approaches, even in that environment, you know, every day is different. Yeah. The airplane's differently loaded. It weighs different. The temperature's different. Maybe it's in Phoenix, it's 117 degrees. Now you got something else working for you because that blacktop's radiating heat up, not wanting you to land. And
right.
yeah, every landing is different. That is for
Yeah. And in general, what he's talking about is if you really want to get a greaser, you may hold the airplane off, you know, and just barely
sure.
let it touch on a runway. Well, that takes runway. So
Yep.
if you're going into a short strip, you don't have that luxury. You just got to plant it and go. But unfortunately, I don't think those United guys can blame the wind or the runway. If they were in Houston with 3 knots of wind,
Right. Yeah. They
yeah, yeah.
don't, it'll be interesting to hear. And you know, it'll probably never be on a news channel, but in our industry, it'll definitely get around what the real story was there, what happened.
Totally. So then we got another big story yesterday. A Delta flight into Atlanta, of course, the king of Delta, is evacuated after tires blow, and they catch fire during landing. And it looks like they stopped on the runway, and then the passengers actually had to use the slide to get everybody off because the landing gear was on fire. Excuse me, on fire, and someone got injured coming off the slide. It looks like.
Yeah, it looked like one injury, but they didn't want to comment or something in the story that I read.
Yeah.
But I don't think it, somebody was probably pushing and shoving and, could have been something minor. Who knows? But yeah, that one, the passengers, that's what I was saying at the beginning. The story I read, one of the passengers did report that it was a hard landing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So blowing a tire, just to, the title of the podcast, Delta and United can't land.
Yeah.
Blown tires, that thing happens. That's why we have multiple tires on these gates.
Right.
There is some of that taken into account in the engineering of these things.
Yeah.
But it is possible also that after the first tire blew, the second tire blew, just because the added weight, because they did lose more than one.
Yeah.
It looked like the trailing edge side of the wheels, or was it just one side?
I think the trailing side. Yeah, I don't have the photo on this article, but one of them did show a close up of the trucks.
Yeah, those it looked like those wheel hubs were buried into the blacktop because they were super hot and probably on fire.
I'm sure you know this, Sean, but there's strict guidelines too on those tires. Like even cases where you have one of the mains goes flat, a lot of times you have to replace both tires per the maintenance manual because of overstressing the other one.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
And the tire pressures are a big deal. If one of these tires had a leak and it was soft, like the football for the Patriots, it could have popped more easily. A famous crash. I know this one well because I was on the Lear 60 at the time that it happened. I mean, it must have been 15 years ago, but it had Travis Barker and DJ AM and a bunch of celebrities had played a show in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, story.
At that Columbia Owens downtown airport, and they were departing at it was a Lear 60 XR, pretty new airplane, and they were departing at after a show, so 1 a.m. or something. Later they found out one of the main tires had it's supposed to have 160 pounds of air in it, and it had 40, so it had a slow leak, and it was really bad. But basically what happened is they accelerated down the runway right before V1. The tire shredded, but when it shredded, it hit the weight on wheel switch on the main truck, and then it damaged that. So the airplane was confused. It didn't know if it was in the air mode or flight mode when it was actually still on the ground. So the pilot aborted, and then when they aborted, they tried to deploy it was a high speed abort, obviously. So they tried to deploy the thrust reversers. Well, the airplane thought it was in the air, so It wouldn't allow them to deploy the TRs. So then they go to maximum braking, but they've already blown a tire, so their braking was kind of faulted, and they went off the end of the runway, and the airplane caught on fire. And I think one of those guys, a couple of people died, and Travis Barker, I think, was badly burned on all of that. But yeah, the tires are a big deal. There's actually some tire shortages going on in the business. It's getting a little better with COVID, but yeah, I mean, and guidelines on when to replace it, that's all in the maintenance manuals, but these things happen.
Yeah.
But
I had heard somebody talking about waiting on tires for their little Cessna. They were on back order for 4 or 5 months or something to get a tire for a little Cessna. These aren't normal tires though. You have on your car that, have one ply of rubber, steel belting. These things have 9, 10, 11 plies, layers of, they don't use steel. They use it's a nylon belting. like a nylon kite string type of thing in between each layer of rubber. And then, so as these tires wear, these maintenance guys can go out there and they can tell how many layers are missing and when to replace them.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think you're putting 165 PSI in your car tire.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
But
Well,
yeah,
we'll
so I
see.
guess the verdict is still out whether the Delta thing in Atlanta, was it yesterday? Today's August 4th.
Yesterday. Yes. So, yeah, it was yesterday, August 3rd.
Yeah, so I guess the jury's still out on whether that was caused by a hard landing, but it totally could have been another one. I don't know, Mike. What do you think this has anything to do with the pilot? Before I ask this question, though, it should be noted that, it used to be before, I mean, a guy was, in his 40s, early 40s, late 30s,
10,000 hours.
yeah, of a lot of hard work and long hours and years of flying for this podunk company or this charter company, freight in the middle of the night, working their way up to get to the major airlines. Now we got guys there in their 20s, and I've heard stories of early 20s already at the majors. Do you think the pilot shortage has anything to do with things like this, hard landings?
Oh, man. Here
Is
you
that
go.
too much of
With the
a
hardball. I'm going to dodge that question like a politician and say, regardless, it's good for the viewers that, they're hiring younger people, and it's the greatest time ever to become a pilot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. The industry is under a lot of stress right now. I mean, we've got we've got more people flying than ever before. I've heard that the airline numbers are up, passenger counts pre-COVID now. I mean, it's crazy. And now you're at the height of summer travel. And I'm sure our viewers know this, but it's just, you can know by people, that have been traveling, the delays and cancellations and things are astronomical now on the airlines. To me, just based on people I know, it's up, 200%. It seems like. I don't know what the actual
I don't, yeah.
number is, but
I was just in Newark, New Jersey, coming home to Cincinnati last night on that last nonstop. And Newark, it was just a madhouse, absolutely crazy. And I'm going through security. Of course, the people in front of me have obviously never been on a passenger airliner ever.
Right.
It's like a family of 11 people. Every one of them's got a bottle of water and a can of Coca-Cola in their bag. They're trying to take through security. Like, come on. Like,
so, a 2-liter.
Yeah. So every bag has to be inspected, and just, oh my gosh, it was just, frustrating.
Man.
But it was everywhere. And then you're right. All the flights are full.
So I had my worst airline experience last week I think I've ever had. And that's a tall order because I do a lot of airlining, but I just took a simple flight from Cincinnati to Boston on a major reputable carrier. And it was nonstop, and it was departing at 5:30 p.m. Now it's summer with thunderstorms. I get a push message, hey, we're going to leave at 6:30. No problem. I show up at the airport a little bit early. They board like 5:40 for a 6:30 departure. I get on, I'm in the seat. We start taxiing out. The captain says, hey, there's thunderstorms over Boston area. We're on they had an edict time, like a ground stop of 30 minutes. He's like, I don't think it'll be that long. So we're going to wait at the end of the runway, just so we're ready to go. Well, it was that long, and then they added another half hour. So we're on the ground an hour before we departed. We get in the air. It's an hour and a half flight. I'm like, thank God we're finally, going to make it. We got a tailwind, hour and a half, even said that. Halfway through the flight, and the crew was excellent. They communicated. They said, hey, the thunderstorms are moving slower than we thought. We're going to come around the back end of the storms and go over Canada. Unfortunately, that routing is going to take us another half an hour. So 2-hour flight. Okay, sure. So they do bring us way up over Maine and then back in. And then we get maybe 20 miles, 30 miles from the airport, very close. I can tell we're in a hold. They come on, hey, we're in a hold. There's one cell. It's moving slow. Don't worry. We have lots of holding fuel. He said we have 45 minutes of holding fuel. So you don't have anything to worry about. But it's not going to take 45 minutes, but we have that. Well, 45 minutes goes long.
Oh God.
We're throttling up, exiting the hold. I'm like, well, we're either landing or we got another problem. Unfortunately, we've run low on fuel. Weather is not moving. We're diverting to Albany, New York. So I'm trying to go to Boston. It's a 3-hour drive. We land in Albany. It's a complete war zone. There's jets everywhere. Everybody needs fuel. So I was afraid the crew was going to time out. They didn't, thank God. But it ends up we were on the ground, like we had 6 or 7 planes in front of us for fuel, like 3 hours on the ground. The captain was great. He came back in the cabin and was talking to everyone, trying to, they offered us to get off, but they had no jetways. They're like, you can get off, but there's no rental cars and there's no hotels, and it's a 3.5-hour drive and no Ubers. So no one got off. We just so then finally at about, I don't know, 1:00 in the morning, we end up taking off and going to Boston, landing. So it took 7 hours and 10 minutes in one seat.
Wow.
From Cincinnati to Boston. Yeah,
Wow.
it was brutal. But at least we made it, and but what's commonly occurring, a common theme, is these airlines are so short, pilots and flight attendants, that you get in a scenario like that where there's a long delay and then the crew doesn't have any duty time left and then everybody's screwed,
Right.
and families I'm hearing are getting stuck all over the place, and it's a nightmare.
Right. Yeah. The shortage of pilots and crew. Absolutely. But it's not just, I mean, some of these bigger, you also run into things where just employees in general are scarce, and you'll come into land and there isn't rampers because they had an issue with this airplane over there. So you're sitting there for 30, 40 minutes on the airplane waiting on some wing walkers. And, you can't just have one guy guide the airplane. You need wing walkers on each wing. You need somebody to run the jetway. You got to have the marshaller. You got to have, it's a whole team of people to pull one of these airplanes into the ramp.
Right.
And then sometimes into the gate. Sometimes you'll pull in the gate. This has happened to me. You pull in the gate, you got all the wing walkers and the ground pounder guys, but the only person that can run the jetway just had to run home for a family emergency, and they're trying to find the airport manager who's also signed off on driving the jetway. I've had that in some of these smaller markets that would never happen, like in Atlanta, Georgia or something, but I'm talking out, in the middle of nowhere in Iowa or something.
Yeah, totally. Man, yeah. But, the industry is stressed. There's no pilots, there's no mechanics, there's no flight attendants, there's no parts, there's no ground crew. Everybody's short. But that's kind of the whole point of our podcast, and is making people aware of that, and our program to help people get involved in aviation quicker. So, even though this is an unfortunate story of some blown tires and things, but it's good news and I guess somebody did get hurt. So sorry about that. But it is good news for aspiring pilots, that there's a lot of jobs out there, because it wasn't like that when me and you started.
Exact opposite. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like, if you're even thinking about this, like, you should, if you're not taking action, you need to go see a doctor so they can examine your head. I mean, this is like the exact opposite world that Mike and I had to go through to get to where we are. And, you just sit around thinking you're going to feel like doing it someday. It doesn't work like that. Take action, and then you will feel like doing the rest of it.
That's right. And we've got a lot of great things coming with the channel. Stay tuned. We got a lot of good interviews coming up. The next one I think you'll really like, but till we see everyone again, we encourage you to get involved in flying, and everybody have a great week.